Before you kill me for the title, let me cook for a little bit. Fortnite is one of the biggest games in the world. It captured the hearts and minds of millions of people, and let's be honest, children, over the time it's been out. So how can I come on my soapbox and say that the game is dead? Well, death can come in many forms. Most people would say that a dead game is one that is unplayable or at the very minimum has a low number of players. Fortnite is far from that, even by the standards that gamers TM online have, that every game must have 100,000 players at a given time. I don't think that Fortnite will ever get to the point where it is dead from a player population perspective. Rather, I think Fortnite has been dying a slow death for years where its core identity has been completely removed from itself. Now what is left feels empty, hollow, and lifeless like a corpse. You may not agree with me, and I'm sure that a lot of people won't, but this is my perspective as someone that has played the game on and off since almost the very beginning. So hear me out and join me as I try to analyze some of the reasons I think this game is quote-unquote dead, as well as where I think the game will be in the future. To start, I want to talk about what matters most, the gameplay itself. I know that's hard to stomach for a lot of Fortnite fans. I believe that there are a lot of changes that have eaten away at the general idea and gameplay loop of Fortnite. I don't want this to come across as someone that hates any form of change, because change can be good. There are a lot of games that I think are stuck in the past and need to change. Fortnite should have evolved, but I think the direction and choices that were made contributed to the game being very different to what it originated as. The first and most apparent is the whole unique appeal to Fortnite in the first place, the building. The game started out as a normal battle royale with the twist of being able to build your own fortifications throughout the map. This was a really refreshing take on the battle royale genre and set the game apart from everything else. When we look at the state of Fortnite now, that core feature is in a weird spot. There are two distinct groups of people that play battle royale at this point. The first is the build players who have taken the feature to the extreme, turning a defensive fortification technique into something that became a high skill ceiling offense and movement technique. Most build lobbies at this point have at least a few players who can build and edit at an above average level. The other group is the people who have completely abandoned building. They don't play any mode with building in it and hate the people who do it at a high level. A core part of the initial identity of Fortnite has become a fracture point for the community. I think both groups have contributed to the death of Fortnite's original concept. The builders have changed the whole point of the feature existing, and the people who don't build at all have removed the feature that makes Fortnite unique in the first place. But I think Epic has exacerbated the problem the most by refusing to have a vision on building in the game. In an attempt to appeal to everyone, they've basically made two separate modes with building and no building. But that has meant that they have to basically develop two different games. This leads to a ton of issues with certain items being unbalanced in different modes and an inability to balance and design for a cohesive vision for the game. This refusal to commit to an identity of what they want building to be in the game has led to the game to feel confused about its own identity. Does it want it to be a high skill technique, heart more back to the name of the game, or does it not want building at all? I'm not super good at building, but I wouldn't be mad at Fortnite for committing to a vision. The next gameplay adjustment that really hurt the game's identity in my opinion was the addition of bots. In Chapter 2 Season 1, Fortnite added AI bots into the game. The blog post introducing it talks about how it was implemented with matchmaking changes to allow for accommodations with the new skill-based matchmaking system that they added. They also say you'll face less bots the higher your skill, so I really don't know how much I can trust that. I know there's a small and loud minority out there that loves to go on Twitter, or as idiots call it, X, the everything app, and say, quote-unquote, bots are good because it allows me to not have to sweat against people who play the game more while I have a life. And I'm so glad I'm making this video now because I can say, stop being a baby. Fortnite wins used to be worth something, man. It was kind of a meme how everyone posted Fortnite wins on their Snapchat story. I did. You did. Don't lie. But there was a reason for that. You were one person out of 100 people who was good enough, even if only for 20 to 30 minutes, to win the game. It was a genuine challenge to win a Fortnite match, and the euphoria that win gave you when you finally got it was amazing. Now that bots were a thing though, wins became jumping out of your chair in excitement level to like, let's go guys, on to the next. Why would you care about winning anymore? The game isn't really a competitive battle royale anymore when you could be in a lobby with 0 real people. This core part of Fortnite's identity was watered down into a participation trophy. This literally isn't an exaggeration anymore. Your first Fortnite match will always be 100% bots. How do I know? I know people who literally have Nintendo Switch accounts with 0 finished matches, so they can take advantage of exactly this. And even for the players who aren't at that level, you still come across a ton of bots. From my personal experience, I'll fight bots for the first couple of interactions and let my guard down, so when I actually have to fight one of the few people in the lobby, I'm not really ready. That's the thing with this as well. It isn't changing the fact that you're going to have to fight real players. It's just extending the time it takes to get there because no one is dying to these bots outside of the people who would be stuck in those 99 bot lobbies anyway. In relation to this game's identity, let me interject with an opinion and speculation alert. The official explanation for them adding bots was for the skill-based matchmaking, and while I think that's true, my skepticism makes me at least consider the possibility of more here. The first thing is that due to prior declines in popularity of Fortnite, they wanted to probably save themselves if it happened again, because finding 20 people and 80 bots is a lot easier than 100 people. We've literally seen stuff get removed recently due to low player counts. While the point of my video isn't to call Fortnite a dead game due to player numbers, as that would be silly, it doesn't really make me feel too confident in that assertion. The other and more nefarious thing is player engagement. Look, I'm not going to diagnose a reason for it, as that could be a whole separate video, but the gaming audience in general just doesn't know how to get good anymore. Instead of being impressed by high skill play, most people just call them sweats and hop off the game. Fortnite doesn't want this because not only is high player numbers good, but if someone feels that they're good at the game and is enjoying it, they're probably a lot more likely to buy a skin. The next one can be more of a nitpick, but I feel like the increased focus on vehicles is kind of against what Fortnite started as. In the beginning, there wasn't really that many movement options to get around, but even back then, it wasn't really needed. One of the things that Fortnite had going for it in comparison to something like PUBG is that the map was a lot smaller, so there wasn't really a huge need for vehicles. Some of the early editions weren't too bad either with golf carts, but for some reason they started to make vehicles into weapons themselves with things like the ballers and the mechs. That was years ago, and this is still a problem we're dealing with. One of the most recent seasons was fully dedicated to vehicle play, Wrecked. They went so hard into this that at the beginning they had to nerf the vehicle play like 3 times so the end of matches weren't just a match of twisted metal for the PS1. And even now, the cars are much more powerful than the ones we had back in Chapter 1, and even if they don't have many combat capabilities now, they're still tanky enough to be a nuisance. It's basically an 800 HP shield. I think the gameplay loop of Fortnite doesn't really need vehicles in it that much, and it just takes away from the special gameplay Fortnite had. It's not even like back in the day when it was just solving a problem with slow movement. Fortnite has added so many movement techniques and abilities to the game that moving around the map isn't hard at all by foot now. It's just bloat to the game at this point to continually focus on this. Rocket racing is dead, man. Just give it up. Adding this on as I'm about to finish the script, but it was leaked that Reload might be getting vehicles in the future, and like, take this with a grain of salt, but if we're getting vehicles in what is probably the smallest battle royale experience they have, what are we doing here? It feels like this just adds on to my point even more. Speaking of a gameplay loop, the gameplay loop of Fortnite is just generally a lot different now, and that makes the game feel completely different. Chapter 1, the gameplay loop was drop, loot, and survive your POI, follow the storm circle and keep fighting, and then have an intense fight in the final circle. Now the gameplay loop is weird and undefined, I'd say. The initial drop is mostly the same with a little bit more luck to it, where it's a coin flip whether you have to fight for that initial POI or it's just going to be filled with bots. The mid-game of Fortnite is really what has hurt the most at this point. It's basically just devolved into side quests. Whether it be the storm NPCs, the shops and NPCs in those, or other objectives on the map, this is basically the only way to keep yourself occupied in this section, especially when there's so much better reward-wise than just looting and hunting players. I actually like some of these things, but they get much less interesting with how they play out in reality. I imagine that they want these side objectives to be little spots of fighting on the map before the main final circle. In reality, usually only 1 or 2 of these are that, and then the others are kind of just left with no contest other than just bots. This also hurt the late game too, because it just concentrates the fighting too much, where once we get to the final circle, there's almost no one left. And while I get that's the point, there's been so many times in modern Fortnite where there'll be like 10 people left, and the circle is like still a quarter of the map. The final circle in general means a lot less than it used to. It's rare to have one like it was back in the day. Most of the time it's spent looking for a random bot in a circle that's way too big. And for better or worse, the final circle has honestly been replaced by the loot island, and since that's where the majority of the final real players go. However, even this is antithetical, as the island is for good loot you often don't get much of an opportunity to use by the time you even get it. Let's get into some of that loot too. More specifically, another thing that seems nitpicky but really hurts Fortnite's identity is the focus on first person. I don't mean for creative, that's a whole separate thing and is fine. Starting in chapter 3 and 4, we start to get full auto guns that would aim down the sights like the MK Ultra assault rifles. These were one of, if not the best guns throughout it being in the game, simply because it broke the rules of what Fortnite guns were and made it a lot easier to hit your opponents. The developers looked at this and said, well, if all the guns are like this, none of them will be broken, right? This led to the gun mechanics in Chapter 5, where all the guns had the ability to scope in. This, combined with the addition of bullet drop, made it so that the gun mechanics didn't even feel like Fortnite anymore. I always joked during Chapter 5 that they turned it into a generic Ubisoft FPS game. While Fortnite's gunplay wasn't my favorite gunplay in gaming, changing it to something that resembles a completely different game makes the game stand out even less. In Chapter 6, they removed the bullet drop and made less of the guns like this, but it still persists with things like the hollow twister. It seems like this is going to be a mainstay in the Fortnite gameplay at this point, but this makes the gameplay even more generic than before. And I feel like this could extend to stuff like NPCs as well, with them adding a PvE element to a PvP game, and while I do think it hurts the identity of this game slightly, like, what do you want me to say here? They're just kind of annoying and stupid. The only ones that really suck to fight against are the NPCs that are basically free UAVs. The thing that hurts the game a lot more is the weapon balance in general. Even though there were a fair share of broken things in old Fortnite, like the double pump or the infinity blade for like the day it was in the game, the overall game balance was pretty solid. Most of the guns had their place, and almost all of them felt like they had a reason to exist. However, as time went on, I feel like a lot of the new stuff either feels like lackluster reskins of weapons just kind of for the sake of it, or the worst thing to ever fight against. Even in the last couple seasons, I can think of like water bending, half of the movement items they add anymore, like those stupid wings that just allow people to run around the map. The Marvel weapons, the swords, and the bat as being a cut above the rest of the loot pool. Like I mentioned earlier with Wrecked and the first person guns, we even had cars and the ability to aim get to that point before. I feel like we've gotten to the point where every season is defined by one or two broken items and an ultimately underwhelming loot pool that kind of just defines the meta. And rather than feeling like an evolution of what Fortnite's gameplay was at the start, it kind of just feels like a lot of other games where the meta is just defined by the shiny new thing for the month. This would be less of a big deal if not for another gripe I had: the lack of micro updates. One of the biggest things Fortnite had from the start was the frequent once-a-week small updates that keep the game interesting and fresh. These would sometimes add lore stuff, but more importantly, they would add a feature or two to spice up the game. It was rarely something huge, but it kept the game consistently interesting and set the game apart at the time. In modern Fortnite, I don't even really know how to describe the updates. They kind of just happen sometimes. Most of the time it's just the big season updates, a mid-season update, and random updates that drop every so often with who knows what features. It's nice to sometimes get a bigger chunk of content, but like I said prior, it makes the game just in line with what everyone else in the industry is doing. I know some of these might be nitpicks, but I feel like it feeds into my bigger point in the section. Fortnite hasn't really had a natural progression to its game. Let's take a game like Rainbow Six Siege for example. I know. Whether you like the game or not, and despite how much it's changed, you can still reasonably see that the game is mostly the same from a gameplay perspective as it was when it first started. There weren't radical overhauls to a lot of the features in gameplay. You can play Siege Year 10 similarly to Year 1. There's definitely going to be major differences, but the game is ultimately still recognizable. With Fortnite, the game has changed so much compared to where it started that it basically needs its own separate game to keep the people who want that old style satisfied. I think a large part of this is because the evolution of Fortnite doesn't really have a through line you can follow. There's been now 5 major updates at this point that radically changed the game so much, most other games would have called it a sequel. I do think that it made sense back in like Chapter 2 when there had been like 10 seasons and the game was starting to get a bit stale, but a new chapter every 4 seasons is holding the game back from finding its footing. I think the best showing of this was Chapter 4, 5, and 6. Despite Chapter 4 being bad from a player numbers perspective, it did start to find its footing a bit despite its flaws. However, Chapter 5 basically changed the entire game into something different that didn't even end up lasting. Therefore, Chapter 6 kind of just feels like a mismatch of Chapter 4, 5, and whatever new that they decided to add. Instead of just moving forward, I feel like the game takes steps forward for a year, and then takes 200 steps to the right every chapter. It's hard to have consistent evolution to your game when your game gets basically a soft sequel every year. If you don't hate me yet, like and subscribe if you're enjoying. It helps a lot, and my videos are usually a lot more positive than this. I just am passionate about the game. Enough with the gameplay, let's look at what everyone wants me to talk about: the artistic identity of the game. Fortnite's old identity was very cartoony and jagged, as opposed to modern Fortnite, which might have an art style, maybe. It definitely aims for a more realistic look, which yet again makes it stick out a lot less than its competitors. I think the biggest change to this was Chapter 5. Honestly, Chapter 5 being so bad is a big reason why I made this video, but I'll talk more about that later. The map and designs of everything in Chapter 5 just scream that it was to show off Unreal Engine 5. The realistic textures and designs, as well as the desaturated colors, just made the whole game look gross. Even the guns and locations themselves were just generic or boring. From Chapter 5 Season 1, is there really anything you can look at with either the loot or the map and be like, wow, that is a really cool, unique, and memorable design? I know you can say that a lot about like Chapter 1 Season 1, but the whole game had a much more recognizable art style at the time. I think it got better over the chapter, but it was still very much lacking. I think the skins weren't as bad, but I think the skins in general are reflective of the change as well. Take any Chapter 1 skin and compare it to one from like Chapter 5 or 6. While the new one looks better, it looks like it could have came from like 10 different games. I think the funniest part of modern Fortnite is that they went full steam ahead into it after Fortnite OG. This is anecdotal, but most of the casual friends I know just dropped the game immediately after OG due to the immense tonal whiplash. Speaking of, the ironic part of the changing art style is that right next to it is a big serving of nostalgia baiting. I know this isn't new either because that's what Season X was about, but it has still gotten a lot crazier than before. The biggest one is Season OG, which on its own isn't that bad, but even at the time it was kind of lackluster. They brought back the original map and tried to do constant updates into past other seasons, but they only halfway did it and didn't really update the map. It was really weird and kind of seemed slapped together because Fortnite was probably at its lowest point ever with Chapter 4. However, it was really successful, so they tried it again, but somehow even worse. With Fortnite Season OG, the nostalgia baiting could be brushed off since it did bring back OG Fortnite semi-faithfully for a little event. But Remix is just kind of a spit in the face to like any fan of Chapter 2. Instead of doing like Season OG did, since Chapter 2 is significantly less popular, they brought back a weird mismatch of early Chapter 2 seasons themed around rappers. I'll get into that in a minute, but it really felt like the Chapter 2 part of the season was very much slapped on. Shortly after Remix, we got Fortnite OG, not to be confused with Fortnite Season OG. This was the third time in 2 years that they used nostalgia as a tactic to get people to play. It worked for a bit, but right now it's nowhere near as successful as it was initially. Even with the launch of Season 3, it just doesn't have that pull, even with things like Tilted Towers. Unfortunately, you can't keep referencing yourself over and over and expect people to care. Like, look at Star Wars. Now, onto those collabs. I could have made the whole video about this, since you know it, I know it, we all know it. This is the biggest thing hurting Fortnite's identity. Fortnite wasn't the most original game in the world when it came out, but it had a style. Even at the beginning of the collabs, they tended to fit the game's art style and weren't super oversaturated, with only about 1 or 2 a season, and even sometimes having parodies of the franchise in Fortnite style. Think of something like the John Wick skin from the Season 3 Battle Pass. In modern Fortnite though, collabs are at a ridiculous point. Skins are just in completely different art styles now, with things ranging from realistic scans of celebrities' faces to anime coming in. There's almost always at least 1 to 3 collab items in the game at any time now. They often range from being good, like the Sub-Zero gloves as I'm recording this, to outright broken, like the water bending and many of the Marvel items. It happens often enough where it makes me just want to have the conspiracy that they're making the weapons good on purpose as like an ad. Collabs aren't even like a once or twice thing a season anymore. We usually get them in double digits per season now. It's gotten to the point where Fortnite isn't really seen as a battle royale anymore. It's seen as the collab game. Most of the casual discussion I see around the game is just, isn't it cool that like Peter Griffin can like shoot Hatsune Miku? With that same argument being used to deflect criticism of this collab insanity as hating on fun, even though you could like do this like 10 years ago in Gmod for free. The identity of the game is defined by the franchises around it. This could work. Look at games like Smash Bros or Kingdom Hearts. However, those franchises feel like they have genuine love and care for not only the franchises that are included, but also feel like they have a good reason for including the stuff they do. Fortnite feels like they just throw anything in that gives them enough money, while rarely doing anything other than like a skin and sometimes a weapon or two. That is also reflected in the people who interact with these collabs too. I know a ton of people who have seen a franchise in Fortnite they like. They log on, they buy a skin, play for 2 days, and then never play again. There isn't anything in Fortnite to keep people who love these franchises around because you aren't playing as the character you love, you're just puppeteering their corpse. It's funny to say that because Fortnite made it literal. Even if I give a criticism to the game, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt with a lot of things and keep it constructive, but man, that Juice WRLD skin, that was genuinely evil. It was advertised as a wholesome tribute, but even though I'm a gaming YouTuber, if I wasn't, I would be making videos about music. I get to call out this bullshit. Only one of the skins were free and the others cost money, so it was basically just an advertisement for the horribly put together posthumous album that would come out later that week. The whole remix season is a decent summary of how I feel about collabs in Fortnite now. It shows us a lack of faith in what they had with original stuff, that they had to make it themed around rappers. And all the rappers they chose don't even like Fortnite. I think the only one that actually ever referenced it was Eminem on like that weird song where he says like he's playing Fortnite with his grandma. I don't mind some collabs here and there to keep things interesting. I've bought a few. I've bought Goku when he came out. But Fortnite has gone from the game that everyone wants to collab with to the game that goes to everyone else to collab with them. Finally, for this section, the thing that was really hurt by the change in focus to collaborations is the story of Fortnite. In the beginning, while the story was mainly lore-based, it had a ton of mystery and intrigue that would build up to small map changes and huge events. However, the story of Fortnite has been weird at best in the past few years. The main person behind the story left the game, so the goal and aim of the story has felt all over the place and has really only come back as of recent. There are story-based quests now, but somehow they feel even less interesting. Instead of environmental storytelling, the story is now just given through walls of dialogue from NPCs. This would be fine, but oftentimes what should be the climax of story arcs are just kind of quest completion texts. There's a reason everyone memes on the "we did it, we saved PLE." Not to mention like Kato Thorn, who just randomly died for no reason and it was kind of shoehorned into OG coming back. The big and flashy parts of the Fortnite story have been lacking too with the events. Chapter 4 didn't really have any events except for OG, where it was just kind of a glorified ad for non-Battle Royale stuff. While Chapter 5 brought back events, they usually had little build-up or attention, and they usually were very small as opposed to the events of Chapter 1. Chapter 6 seemed to bring back the scale of them with giant fights happening again, but there's still little advertising or build-up for these events, so a lot of people miss this. I want you to take a guess what the events were with the most attention in the past few years. If you guess the Remix concert and the Disney Fortnite E3 panel, you get a cookie, I guess. I wonder what these have in common. Now let's get to the main reason I even had the idea for this video a year ago. I mentioned it a minute ago, but the event in OG was a big ad for non-Battle Royale modes. These modes very much came off as an attempt to push Fortnite out of the Battle Royale mold, whether it be the weird key art changes, the quote-unquote inappropriate skin filtering, and dedicating an entire chapter launch to these modes. It's clear that they wanted to at least have as little attention on BR as possible. That's really weird, considering that's the whole reason people play your game. If you know anything about Tim Sweeney, this isn't really surprising that Fortnite would go on this insane push to make a metaverse. They had whole entire dev teams working on these modes. They weren't just slop and creative, they were basically full games put out in Fortnite. So much so that you can't uninstall them even if you don't like it. And somehow they can't figure out how to implement that to the point where that feature got delayed by over a year. Now it's time for me to explain why all of these modes are stupid. This isn't me coming on as a Battle Royale purist, even if I think that they should focus on like the point of the game. I tried to give these modes a chance, but they all kind of fail spectacularly. Let's start with the biggest success story of the modes. LEGO Fortnite. This is basically an epic developed LEGO survival game where you can play as Fortnite skins. I would point out that this is yet another collab, but beating a dead horse and all. The game from a visual and technical perspective is pretty well polished. I'll give them credit for that. However, after the first week or two, the game just completely nosedived in popularity. I get that's what a lot of new games do, but it went from around like 1 million players to not even be able to crack 100k. That's really bad for a free game. This is in large part because the progression of the game was really bad. They made a good sense of progress throughout the first few hours, but once you were done with that, there wasn't really anything else to do. The game felt playable, but not really complete. It didn't even have the creative thing you expect from Minecraft or even LEGO themselves, as there was a pretty strict build cap when the mode launched. A LEGO game that restricts your building, you know, but they had to add in overpriced LEGO shop items and a battle pass later, you know. It makes sense why a majority of players left so quickly because there just wasn't much to do. Updates were often really small and infrequent. Even the major updates weren't really moving people more than like a modern Minecraft update would. Like, they added like fishing. I feel like the Odyssey update is what this game needed to keep people around, but it came way too late for most people to care. The damage was done. This is going to be a common theme with these modes. The one mode I will not be charitable with is Rocket Racing. As far as pure gameplay is concerned, I think it's the most whatever racing game ever. It doesn't really have much of anything to make it stand out. think the most interesting parts of Rocket Racing and why it failed lie more outside of the game itself. A lot of videos covering these modes are coming at it simply as a Fortnite player. So the reason this mode failed was simply just being a mediocre racing game that failed to capture a casual audience to them. And while this is true, it failed to gain a diehard fan base because its mere existence is a spit in the face to the people who would have been that. Rocket League players. Rocket League players have been asking for an engine upgrade and a racing mode for years. The monkey's paw curls. They got it, but not as a thing for Rocket League fans. No, Epic bought the game and the development team and made them make this mode as a Fortnite experience. This becomes even worse when the entire Rocket League item economy and most development resources on this game were taken away so that they can go work on Rocket Racing and have the items transfer over there. We can talk about the irony of NF Tim Sweeney doing his best to remove player control over their items, but I feel like you get it. This mode had no future as it was just a stupid tone-deaf idea from the start. And the fact that it's the only one of these modes to basically be officially put in stasis says this even more. It isn't a coincidence that as soon as the cancellation got announced, I started seeing Rocket League news posts again on Steam. The other main mode that was pushed during Chapter 5 was Fortnite Festival, developed by Harmonix of Rock Band fame. I have mixed feelings about this mode. I think from a purely gameplay standpoint, I think it's a pretty good reintroduction for casual audiences to get back in the rhythm games. It was simple, and you could play with your friends, and honestly, very importantly, you had a wide amount of popular music people liked. However, while it had a lot of things to make a successful rhythm game for casuals, it was missing a lot of the little things, or had little bad things that added up. The first is the most obvious, and I hate to use lingo that will be outdated in a year, but this game has no aura. The stage and the crowd are always the same. The presentation is completely generic, and like most of Fortnite, the most spice came from the licensed skins that look like something I would have done in Gmod 10 years ago. Look at the old Guitar Hero and Rock Band games and compare them to this. It's night and day. Things like battle mode being horribly balanced, the weird situation around instrument support, and the price of songs rubbed a lot of hardcore players in the wrong way too. However, this mode still has like 10,000 players, which I would honestly consider the biggest success so far. That may seem like it's dead and even worse than LEGO Fortnite, but I think rhythm games have a very similar pull as fighting games. They might get a lot of initial casual appeal, but in reality, the people that end up staying are the hardcore players. Having 10k of those is a success. However, I think there's two issues. This still feels completely out of place in Fortnite, and more importantly, I think Epic wanted more than that. Now the hardcore players are getting shafted too, as they shifted songs into a FOMO model that no other rhythm game I can think of does. So, for all the marketing and hype put into these modes in Chapter 5, we have a survival game that bled most of its players, other than people trying to like AFK for XP and maybe a few dedicated ones. A racing game that died a year after it released, and a solid rhythm game that's probably performing below Epic's expectations. But they kept trying the modes even after this though. Ballistic was the first fully separate from BR mode they released that actually made sense to add. It's a shooter game added to a shooter game. Crazy. Now the issue is that a good idea doesn't necessarily lead to good execution. The game is a tactical shooter similar to like CS or Valorant with an economy and class system. From a gameplay perspective, it's solid enough. The first person aspects of Fortnite are still a bit shaky, but I think it's solid enough to be enjoyable. Honestly though, it just kind of feels like Spectre Divide without the dual body feature. So what's the issue then? Well, they released the game mode as early access, which considering that the modes I talked about earlier were basically early access, that should make you worried. There was one map in the game. Oh, yeah, this has the potential to be something cool, but that would be in like 3 years. And even by then, will people care? Ignoring the wait, I feel like Ballistic has a cap on its potential simply because Fortnite players just don't really overlap with the tactical shooter type. You have to be methodical to play these, and Fortnite is a very twitchy shooter. Also, Ballistic has nothing so far to make it stand out in the genre, so why would anyone play this? They also released the LEGO City Life. Do I even need to talk about this? It's just a glorified RP mode. Of course it died in one day. This feels like it was just made to fulfill a licensing agreement with LEGO. In addition to Rocket League, they also ate Fall Guys alive and kind of put it in Fortnite? Question mark. You also want to enjoy this game before it gets sucked up in the Fortnite metaverse demon dimension, but that's a topic for another video. It's only really in creative, and I honestly thought they were going to shut the game down and just put it in Fortnite based on what I said at the end of my Fall Guys video. However, based on how all these modes are performing, I really doubt it's going to be more than just creative tools at this point.
Trallallero trallallà, porco Dio e porco Allah. Trallallero trallallà, porco Dio e porco Allah. Trallallero trallallà, porco Dio. Tung 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 tung.
The most successful mode they made is the one that's been there the longest, and honestly the one they put the least effort into, I'd say. Even if it's good from a numbers perspective, I also don't even really know if you can call it a success. One of the other big pushes with Chapter 5 was Fortnite Creative, specifically UEFN, since it was basically just a watered down version of Unreal Engine 5. Epic made their own experiences that showed the potential of the creator, which was honestly pretty neat. And it must have worked because Creative is by far the most popular mode besides Battle Royale. Oh. Yeah, majority of the things made here are just complete slop. Despite being advertised as a powerful tool, it's still limited by the bounds of being in Fortnite, so most of the games are just really basic, or just are broken and weird and jank. It doesn't help that Epic pays people based on engagement, so a lot of the most popular things are like red versus blue maps and tycoons. Say what you want about Roblox, but I've had a lot more success finding hidden gems there than here. Epic is also probably losing money with this because they have a lot less avenues than Roblox to get a cut of things. The only Fortnite modes that are genuinely smash hits are the funniest ones that it could have possibly happened to. Reload and OG. I already talked about OG before, but Reload is basically just stealing Rebirth from COD with respawns and a small map from Battle Royale. The most popular modes are the Battle Royale ones. Wow, it's almost like if you make stuff around why people come to your game, people will play it. Despite all these modes added, the charts are always topped by Battle Royale in its various modes. Epic wanted a metaverse, but the players just wanted to play Fortnite. And I honestly think spin-offs are fine too, but I think they need to be supplementary. They shouldn't take away resources from the main game. Some of the spin-offs were made by other teams, but modes like Lego and Ballistic are still developed by Epic. I think the perfect example of this is something like Pokemon. They have, or at least had, a ton of spin-offs, but they were always developed by external teams while they worked on the main games, and were external games. This allowed for cool things to be made while the main game still thrived. However, due to having to have this like metaverse and shared shop stuff, Fortnite just doesn't get this luxury. In general, these modes were as wide as the ocean, but as shallow as a puddle. They covered so many genres, but none of them in depth enough to be an actual force in those genres. The lack of depth made a lot of the appeal to hardcore players just completely go away. So the casual player base they wanted had no foundation to join in on. Most importantly for Epic, I feel like this was a huge push to make Fortnite a bigger game that appealed to more people and brought more people in, but I feel like it just spread the existing player base. I really can't think of anyone now or then that specifically downloaded Fortnite just to play Festival, Creative, or Lego. The majority of people I know who tried them out or currently play them now, it's because they already have Fortnite and it gives decent XP. All it did was hurt the Fortnite brand image into being just another metaverse slop game. Even if there were people it brought in, the premature release of most of the modes just led people to try them for a bit and then drop them due to a lack of depth. You only get one first impression and Fortnite wasted it. To hit this point home even further, I'm going to go through each mode and name the alternatives that most people are probably playing instead. If people want a serious survival game, they're probably playing something like Rust or Ark or the million other ones out there. And the kids who would be playing Lego Fortnite are probably playing Minecraft already. Rocket Racing didn't really have the casual appeal or charm of something like Mario Kart. It didn't really have the fleshed out features something hardcore arcade fans would want to get out of something like Trackmania, or the realism of something like Forza or Gran Turismo. Fortnite Festival doesn't have much competition from Guitar Hero or Rock Band anymore, but hardcore rhythm game fans have had stuff like Clone Hero and Osu with so much more content to them. And the kids nowadays love stuff like FNF with like 10 times more charm and personality. Ballistic offers nothing Counter-Strike can't, and I honestly think the strategy was to fill the void in the console market that tactical shooters hadn't filled yet. But Valorant beat them to the punch. City Life I joked about, but why would anyone play it over a Roblox RP game where they get much more control over their look and gameplay experience? Same with Creative, it's popular, but Roblox is so much easier to get into and install for its main demographic of kids. All they need is a browser. Meanwhile, Save the World still has more players than the majority of these modes and is the black sheep of Fortnite. Fortnite players just want to play Fortnite, man. And as I wrote this vid, I started to realize something that was a big comparison to a lot of what Fortnite's doing right now. It's just doing what Call of Duty has been doing for years. Call of Duty I would also consider dead in the sense that the game is just a shell of what it was. There's a lot of comparisons you can make between the points in this video and what COD has done. With Modern Warfare 2019 and the Call of Duties after, there was constant debate and back and forth on major core aspects of the franchise, like the minimap and the arcade feel, which is similar to the building issue now. While there isn't bots in the franchise yet, I feel like the adjacent issue of skill-based matchmaking has been the hottest topic in COD for years. People hate it and feel that it's hurting the game and the ability for skill expression. Wow, almost like bots in Fortnite. For a lot of the weird features that have been added in the Fortnite, it reminds me a lot of what COD has done with just copying other games and adding gimmicks just for them to disappear in the next title. Weapon balance? Well, DLC guns in Call of Duty games have been broken since they were first introduced, even in Black Ops 2. The whole point of not having a solid through line of progress is applicable here too, because there's quite literally a new game by a different dev every year. The artistic identity of COD has also been an issue for like 10 years with Snoop Dogg and Call of Duty Ghosts and clown skins in Advanced Warfare. Now it's just like Fortnite with TMNT and Homelander running around. The story of COD is hurting too. Like the whole Modern Warfare reboot trilogy has been a mess because major story beats have been put in Warzone cutscenes and just kind of thrown off to the side. I feel like the strongest connection is the replacement modes. Call of Duty made a battle royale called Warzone that, unlike Fortnite, actually started to replace the main game for a few years. But even with that much success, they're basically just copying Fortnite OG in the hopes that it brings enough players back to this mode to not cancel the whole thing and just go back to where they were at before. So why do I bring up this comparison? I've played Call of Duty since like Black Ops 2 when I was a kid, and I've loved the franchise, but the franchise is basically dead to me now though. It's still insanely popular and will probably be the best selling game every year until the end of time, but if you asked anyone, would they say that COD is at its peak right now? I sincerely doubt it. I've watched COD go from like industry juggernaut to like chasing trends for the past 10 years. Most of what Call of Duty is nowadays is a product of Fortnite being so popular. The identity of COD is gone. The only part of it left is like left for launch marketing before they add in the Fortnite-esque stuff like a week after launch. I like Fortnite and I don't want it to become Call of Duty. It's just hard to ignore the obvious signs I'm seeing. If Fortnite continues to push away what makes it Fortnite, then what's stopping this game from ending up like Call of Duty? Despite all I said, I really don't have much power to do anything with this, so where do I realistically see things going? To be honest, it's kind of bleak. I don't see much change in the future. Despite the numbers on Fortnite being nowhere near its peak, it's still one of the biggest games in the world, and more importantly, they make more money from skins than ever. Epic just lost a class action lawsuit for hundreds of millions of dollars. And they were able to negate it just from a few weeks of rare skins, a few collabs, and bringing back Renegade Raider. This game is untouchable, and even more so because people just don't really care. I can get here on my soapbox and talk about how the identity of Fortnite is a husk, but I'm sure I already got a few comments saying that I hate fun. Casual fan is the exact same as Call of Duty. They log on, buy a bundle or two, and don't really care about any discourse or discussion about the game. The hardcore fan is rarely anyone that's played Fortnite in the original days, so their perspective on what the game is comes from the past few years after the identity has started to go away and shift. They don't really care or see an issue of where Fortnite is right now, and I honestly can't blame them. If you didn't experience the start, then why would it have any connection to you? The same thing happens with Call of Duty, where a lot of these kids are growing up with the games that started to shift away or were considered bad by the community at the time they released, and they have personal connections to those games now. Even outside of Fortnite, the industry has just become Fortnite itself. Whether it's Call of Duty or any other live service game, they usually don't have much of an identity at all anymore. Due to how well Fortnite skins sell, a lot of games have taken that model and how extreme the skins have been, even if they just don't fit the game at all. A lot of the biggest games have become homogenized into being all the same from an artistic lens. Even something like CS, which isn't as extreme, is filled with tons of silly cosmetics now. Despite other things popping up that have been different or fresher or more innovative, they're typically just either niche or a flash in the pan. We've had times like this with the 7th gen, taking after Call of Duty and its gritty, gray aesthetic, so I expect the rest of the industry to move to something else eventually after Fortnite. However, I just want to see that move into something unique rather than just chasing trends, and I want to see that for Fortnite itself. I like the game, but I want it to be the game. Realistically though, Fortnite is a valuable part of Epic Games, and while it is too big to fail, I think even at this point, the ability to have any sort of failures within Fortnite have an effect just might be over. Yes, I think they will pivot if things hit the fan with the game. They gave free battle passes when Apex was destroying them. It's happened before. However, I think Fortnite could shut down tomorrow and Epic would still be one of the most valuable companies in gaming. This is because Unreal Engine has zero competition. Unity shot themselves in the foot, Godot is way too small and niche, and most proprietary engines are just being phased out. For better or worse, Epic controls a majority of AAA games even existing at this point. Fortnite is just a little extra cherry on top that they use to test the engine. So, do I think Fortnite would change it all? No, not really. I still think there's enough interest in the parts of Fortnite I complained about for it to not really cause too much negative feedback. And even if it did, they really have just the cop-out now of telling people to play OG. This doesn't mean that you personally can't do anything though. If you watch this video and don't really agree with me, then more power to you, genuinely. If people are getting enjoyment out of where Fortnite has gone, even if I think it's completely outside of the sphere of what the game was, then fair enough. But if you do agree with me, then just stop playing. There's so many other games you can play and enjoy, even in the genre. For me personally, I don't even really play Fortnite as much as I did before. If you don't like collabs being in the game all the time or the weird gameplay choices and modes, just don't play or buy them. Is one person going to do that much? Not really, but millions of people think that they're one person and can't change it. If I can leave you with one piece of advice, whether you agree with me or not, just don't buy the battle pass until you're done with it. If you're enjoying the game enough to finish the pass, then I think Fortnite is deserving of that purchase. Don't force yourself to play something you don't like just to get some silly skins and your V-Bucks back. If Fortnite's a dead game, just don't force yourself in the coffin with it. Hey everyone, long time no see. You know the usual, like and subscribe. I know it's been a while, but this video has been in development for quite a bit. I think it's went through like 3 different scripts and the last one was probably going to be like 3 hours long. I hope you enjoyed it though. I'm going to start making some content that's less script heavy again and more positive for the most part. So especially because this took a lot out of me. And thank you all for supporting me, even if this has taken a while. Special thanks to Cam, Mr. Bunguside, Master Necro, and Nico for supporting me on Patreon and YouTube memberships. If you want to help me out, then go to any of those below. I genuinely can't thank you guys enough. I hope to see everyone on here a lot more and to get some awesome stuff out. My Discord's in the description like usual, but other than that, my name is Chaos For Real, and I will take down this video if Epic gives me an icon skin. Yeah, it's been a bit since I wrote the script. I just wrapped up editing here, and yeah, a new mini-season based around Star Wars came out. Yeah, it sucks pretty hard. Gameplay-wise, it sucks. The guns feel lame. There's like no movement whatsoever. And I feel like there's things that both ruin fun in zero build and build. There's like no movement in zero build. And then with build, you can just destroy whole structures with the lightsabers. It's not fun. The battle pass they added is clearly designed to give most of the skins people actually want in the shop and then just leaving the rest in whatever horrible mini-season battle pass this is. It got shoehorned into Lego and Ballistic for some reason. Like the starting pistol in Ballistic is just the Star Wars blaster. Why? This just amplifies the criticisms I had here. Like it's just based around collabs and it's shoehorned in to the story too. Like why is Hope and Jonesy involved in this? Who cares? And it seems like people are actually fed up. The player count is the lowest I've ever seen. That player count screenshot I used earlier in the video, that's from this season. It's pretty bad. Does that mean I think people like collabs less? No, I think just people don't like collab seasons they can't choose. I think people will just buy collabs of whatever they want. It's just they don't want to be forced to participate in ones they don't care about. And also, AI Vader. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. And I hate the people defending it because his estate said so. Either James Earl Jones knew what he was doing with this stuff and he threw his fellow VAs under the bus, or he was a 90-year-old man pressured to sign away his rights to his voice, so his kids could get Disney money forever under the very narrow voice AI uses we had a few years ago. And don't hit the excuse of they couldn't have added this with voice actors. We just didn't need it at all. This is probably testing the waters of what can be used in Fortnite as far as AI, and considering games like the finals exist, we might have already lost. Disney, just stop with the BS and just make Battlefront 3, man. And I'll reiterate it again, Fortnite just needs to be Fortnite again. Be creative and do your own thing instead of leaving it to other franchises and AI generation. I'm Chaos For Real, and things are bleak.